Greetings everyone and welcome to DSG Global Academy's HTS Classification presentation. My name is Deep Sengupta, the founder of DSG Global Academy, and I'm delighted to have all of you on the call today. So the presentation today is HTS Classification, and I'll very quickly go over the agenda. Number one, I'm going to be talking about the history and the structure of the harmonized tariff schedule. Then we're going to be talking about the importance of having the correct HTS numbers and the common errors that customs looks for. We're also going to be looking at the various penalties that customs issues for incorrect classifications. Then we're going to go over, admittedly, a little, how do I put it? It's not boring, but it's a little technical area, which is very important for determining your harmonized codes, and that's the GRIs, the General Rules of Interpretation, for selecting your HTS number. And then we're going to look at various resources you can use to come up with the correct HTS number. Now, a lot of you have asked me to discuss your specific products, be it medical devices or chemicals or fabric and apparel. Unfortunately, this 1 hour is really a 101 introduction to HTS classification, but I would be delighted to spend some time with you all over the phone, if you'd like, to go over your specific commodities and your specific classification codes, if you'd like more customized information. With that, let's talk about the HTS structure. The HTS, remember, over 200 countries that do trading, and they all had different harmonized codes till the 1950s, where the World Customs Organization created a task force to come up with a harmonized system. And this was known as, the harmonized system of nomenclature. And finally, all these countries came to an agreement that, you know what, we can pretty much agree on the first 6 digits for most commodities in existence at that time. You've got to remember that at that time, computers, as we know it, were not invented. So they were actually known as automated data processing machines. And there's many other items we use in daily life, in audio, visual, computers, that wasn't in existence. So at that time, the World Customs Organization said, let's all use the first 6 digits together, but the last 4 digits are reserved for the individual country to customize based on their needs or the customs duty rates that they are imposing or they want to impose. Now, developing countries wanted to levy a higher customs duty rate because, they rely more on customs duties for their revenue and functioning of the government. And there could be certain other developed countries, industrialized nations at that time, that had a lower customs duty rate, but had many more different headings that they wanted to monitor and get statistics on. So they had many more at the last 4-digit level. So remember, in the United States, the harmonized codes are contained in the HTS schedule, which is published by the US International Trade Commission. It's on their website. It's got 22 different sections and a total of 99 chapters where different commodities are all listed out. The first 2 digits is known as the chapter number. The next 2 digits, which is the total of the 4, is known as heading. And then you have another 2, the subheading. And the last 4 digits are known as the statistical suffix. Now, some developing countries don't have last 4 digits. They may only have last 2 digits. So Germany, on the other hand, many times has 11 digits, and that's all to come to a higher degree of granularity. These are the different sections in the tariff schedule. There's, as I said, a total of 22, but these are just some examples. And then within each section, there'd be specific chapters. Like we said, 99 chapters within 22 sections. So, for example, animal products, textiles, they'd all have about 4 or 5 chapters within them. When you open a harmonized tariff book, this is what it looks like. On the left-hand side, you've got you start with the chapter number. In this case, it's 42, which is articles of apparel. And then you go to 03, which is the specific heading. In this case, it's articles of apparel and clothing accessories of leather or composition leather. And what you've got to do is to go down the list and choose the one that's more best suited for your products. The article description is on the next column. And then under rates of duty, you've got 3 headings. You've got 2.7%, but then the next heading, the column says special and it says free. Now, free means it is eligible for certain free trade agreements, such as A, CA, E, IL, J, and MX. Now, all these refer to specific free trade agreements. For example, CA is Canada, MX is Mexico, so that's NAFTA. IL is US Israel, J is US Jordan free trade agreement. But just because it says free and you're bringing your goods in from Mexico doesn't mean it automatically qualifies. It just means that there is an exemption if your goods are eligible under NAFTA. So you need to check the NAFTA rules and see if you meet the threshold for being originating or eligible under NAFTA. And finally, column 2, which has a very high 35% rate of duty, is a punitive duty for certain countries that are, unfriendly to the United States, or ones we have embargoes with. And this could obviously be, what used to be known as, formerly our embargo with Cuba, North Korea, Iran would all fall under these very high rates of duty. Now, classification is very important because that really determines how much customs duty the government can collect from you. And if you get it wrong, you're either underpaying, which again is a bad thing, or you're overpaying duties. Now, why is underpaying duties a good thing? You go to a restaurant and they forget to add a couple of items on your bill. Well, obviously you should go and tell them, hey, you forgot this. In a customs environment, it's more important to tell them, because what if within 5 years they come back and they say, you know what, your classification was wrong and you underpaid duties, so please pay back these duties with interest. That happens very, very often. And obviously nobody wants to overpay duties, right? Because if the government finds out you're overpaying, do you think they're going to come back and give you a refund check? Well, no. Another point to remember, which we'll cover towards the end of this presentation, is that classification is really not what number you like. There's really a series of rules that you need to follow to come up with the correct code. I remember a couple of years back, I was dealing with a company in the Silicon Valley, and we had their entire engineering team in our meeting, where I was going over different HTS codes that might be applicable to their products, because their products were brand new and there were a couple of HTS codes that were applicable. And I went over the codes, I went over the technology. Finally, I asked the company, so which do you think is most applicable? I was asking for a technical response, but they said, give us the one with the lowest duty rate. Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. And I'll talk about that later on in the presentation on what are the rules we need to follow. The importance of accurate classification is obviously customs is looking at it, and failure to provide accurate classifications could invite additional scrutiny and possibly an audit from customs, which nobody wants. Now, when your products come into the United States, your broker, in most cases, puts in the HTS number, and automatically that triggers many things in the system. Number one, it triggers what your rate of duty is. It also triggers whether there's any ADD or CVD, that's anti-dumping duty, or countervailing duties. That's all linked to your HTS number. It also shows up what free trade agreements would be applicable for your HS number, and see if you're bringing it in from those countries or you're claiming any free trade agreements. Also, there could be a participating government agency flag. Now, a participating government agency used to be known as OGA, other government agencies, and essentially it's other agencies that have a role to play in the whole import process, such as Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, also the US Department of Agriculture, USDA, Fish and Wildlife, Federal Wireless Commission, FCC. All of these different agencies control some HTS numbers and products. So if your product, for example, it's a medical device, comes in, it would automatically show an FDA flag, right? So the FDA will then look at your product and determine if it wants to do an investigation or additional screening. The benefits of accurate classification and getting it right really is you're paying the duty that you correctly owe the government, not more, not less, but also once you have a history of correct classification compliance, over time that really leads to a quicker clearance of your goods. Now, if you have, you're a habitual offender when it comes to HTS classifications, customs automatically starts screening your products more. And so having correct HTS reduces the likelihood of your goods being stopped, and also of any penalties and fines and interest. And I'll talk about that later. These are some findings from customs. When they do audits of companies, this is what they look for. And if they see any of these red flags, there's a high likelihood that your classification history is probably a little suspect, and then they'll dive deeper into your classification and look for errors. Number one, I call this garbage in, garbage out. Many times companies have very brief descriptions for their products, or have an alphanumeric number description which doesn't make sense to anybody. So if you have that description on your commercial invoice, how can anybody classify it correctly? Either your broker or anyone else in between. So US Customs and other customs agencies, they know that if the commercial invoice has an incomplete description, chances are very likely that the product is misclassified along the way. Also, if you continuously use other headings, which means the basket rate, which is the residual rate, that's another reason for customs to say, this person's either lazy because they're choosing the residual basket rate too often. So that's another red flag. Insufficient data. If your product is really a complex product that needs product knowledge, that's an area customs would drill down deeper. Also, if you have a wide range of products, a very wide catalog and different commodity types and lots of diversity in your product portfolio, but you just use a handful of codes, that's a huge red flag right there. So once customs sees these red flags, they know that if they drill down deeper, they'll find a lot of errors, and that will result in penalties from you, which makes the government happy, right? The enforcement is doing a successful job. So what happens when customs sees that you have incorrect HTS? Usually, if it's just sometimes, if they see an error, they'll send you what's known as a Customs Form 28, which is a request for information. Say, could you tell us more about this product? Please give us product descriptions, catalogs, websites, so we can understand this product better. Because you've classified it in a particular way, And what triggers that usually is maybe a lot of other people in your industry are doing it wrong, and customs is kind of, doing a concerted effort to change the classification for all of you. The next step, once customs hears from you, usually they issue a CF29, which is the next step, which is a notice of action. Either they agree with your justification to the CF28, request for information, or they may say in the CF29, notice of action, you know what, we disagree, you classified it under this code, we think it should be another code, and by the way, we are charging you the additional duty, if there is any additional duty. Now, many times during an audit, when customs sees that you've misclassified your products, but it's a simple mistake. A simple mistake is just, a failure to exercise reasonable care or competence. It's negligence. They'll give you a notice for negligence and assign a penalty. But if they see that you should have known, they gave you advance warning, you've been making this mistake again and again, and there's really no excuse, and you can't claim deniability, or not that deniability ever is an excuse, but you can't say it was just a clerical error or first-time mistake. They're going to hit you with a gross negligence penalty. And finally, if they see that you're trying to circumvent the rules and anti-dumping rules by really misclassifying your products blatantly and fraudulently in an intentional manner, that is a fraud level of culpability. Now, why do all of this matter? Because of this slide. You will see that if they assign a negligence penalty, then it's twice the amount of duties that you're going to pay as penalty. And if there is no revenue loss, then the penalty amount would be 20% of the value of your import. In case of gross negligence, it's double. If you've saved X amount of duties by misclassifying, the penalty is going to be 4X. Or it could go up to 40% of the value if there's no revenue loss. Now, how does customs choose between the duty amount or the value to assign as penalties? They'll choose the lesser of the two. So that's good. But in case of fraud, apart from criminal time and jail time, for real fraud cases, it could go up to 100% of the value of the good in question. So that's why I want to say classification is very important. It has a serious dollar impact if you're doing it incorrectly. So how do you classify your widget? You've got a product, and I get a lot of these items because a lot of my companies are now also the small to medium-sized entrepreneurial companies. I'm based in the Silicon Valley. So, for example, if Apple Watch comes out, there'll be hundreds of different app makers that, or accessory makers that, might fit in with the Apple Watch. It's interesting. And a lot of these products are not listed on the harmonized tariff schedule because they're really 21st century products. So the first thing to do is to collect all the relevant information about your product. What does it do? What is it used for? What is it made of, right? And then you start looking at the different chapters that would be relevant to your product. And this is how you go about it. First, you look at the section, then you find the chapter that's most relevant, then the heading, then you go down the list, subheading, tariff number, right? In many instances, there may be more than one heading that may be applicable to your products. It could be maybe 2, maybe 3 headings with different harmonized codes. Now, obviously, if you have 2 equal headings to choose from, obviously you'd want to do some customs duty savings, right? But you should first determine which is the most applicable HTS code, and the way to do that is by using the general rules of interpretation or the additional US rules. Now, the general rules are common around the world, and the US rules obviously are specific to the US. And anybody who's classifying their product really needs to know these rules. There's a lot of information in these rules, and as I said ahead of time, it's a little technical, but if you've never heard these before, it's very important to go over them, so thanks for your patience in advance. So these are the general rules of interpretation in order to determine your correct HTS number. And if you are responsible for determining your HTS number, it's very important that you be familiar with this. Many times when US Customs comes back to my customers and says, how exactly did you come up with this heading, and why is this heading the correct heading? The justification you should provide is we are basing it on these GRI or this GRI or on this customs ruling, right? So this is actually very good justification for your HTS number. So number one, Customs has given us these GRIs, and they said you've got to go down the list. Number one is EO nominee, which means by name, which means your item is specifically provided for or mentioned in the tariff. You know, that's a no-brainer, right? Most times it's not that easily listed in the tariff. Then you look at GRI2, which deals with incomplete or unfinished material. And GRI2B is, materials that have more than one substance. How is that determined? And, that says go to GRI3. GRI3 is very interesting. GRI3A says always go for a specific description over a general description, right? So a specific description trumps the general description. A GRI3B deals with mixtures, composite goods, sets for resale, a retail sale, and where there are different items put together. And Customs in this case says always go for the item that gives it the essential character. Now, finding out the item which gives it the essential character or determining what is the essential character is also subject for debate. For instance, if there's many items in a little kid's makeup set, there's a mirror, there's a comb, I don't know what else there might be, and all these little vanity things. I've got a 6-year-old daughter, I should know, but so Customs will say, what is the one item that gave it its essential character? Now, that essential character could be determined by use, could be determined by value, right? So on and so forth, by the cost. Then there's GRI3C, which is last in numerical order. Now, if you find 2 HTS numbers that are absolutely spot on for your product, you've gone through GRI1, GRI2, GRI3A, 3B, GRI3C says, well, in the case of a tie, you've got to look at the one later in numerical order. So if you're looking under 8524 and 1913, at the end of the day, it will be 1913. And I'll give you a very interesting example. I obviously can't take customer names, but when the first of these wearable technologies came on the market, that was one of my clients, and they said, Deep, we want to classify this. I said, wow, you've got a very interesting accelerometer in your little device that can count steps and find out all this information about your day, how many steps you've taken in your fitness. And customs, and we said, customs, it should be classified under Chapter 85. And customs came back and said, well, we think it's a pedometer, which is classified under this heading of GRI 3C as the latest in numerical order. So, they used this GRI to put it to box this latest innovative product as a pedometer. So, customs uses this quite a bit. Again, GRI 5 talks about packaging material and containers, and so that's pretty much most of it. So let's very quickly jump in and discuss some of these GRIs. GRI 3.1, and this is the language. I don't mean to bore you, but I just wanted to put it out there so you can see it. It says classification to be determined according to the terms of the headings. In layman's terms, if your product description is contained in the harmonized tariff, GRI 1 is your basis for classification. For example, a dishwasher. Hey, how do I classify a dishwasher? Very simple. Dishwashing machines of a household type, it's provided for, and every chapter starts with legal notes on what is included or excluded in that chapter. And if it's not included and specifically provided for, you could tell customs, or you could put a note in your product list, your HTS list, saying justification being GRI 1. Okay? Again, in this case, there's a sale for a sailboat, and you've got two headings. One is tents, sails for boats, and the other one is water skis, sailboats, other water sport equipment. So in this case, because sails for a sailboat is specifically provided for under Chapter 6306, it will fall under that heading. Although broadly it could have been interpreted to fall under 9506, but under GRI 1, it falls where it's specifically provided for in Chapter 6306. Now, GRI 2A, as I talked about incomplete or unfinished articles. And what I said here is that the essential character is important, and even if it's unassembled or disassembled, what was the finished product? Should it have been complete or finished? And that would be the heading. And customs have just included a ruling which says, what the essential character of the product is can be determined by weight, value, or the role that that component plays in the use of the goods. Sorry, I just skipped through some slides. So for instance here, an example would be a cycle is usually never shipped as a cycle. It's shipped in different parts. It's broken down into a kit. But the kit would have the same classification of the cycle had it been fully assembled. So that's the theory behind GRI 2A. GRI 2B talks about combinations of materials. And I usually use this a lot in terms of liquids, which are mixtures, and then it's be classified under GRI 3. For example, in this case, you've got a chair that's made of wood and of steel. So what customs allows you to do is to classify it with the one that gives it the essential character. Is it steel or is it wood? In this case, it really looks like a wooden rocking chair. So I classify it as a wooden chair. Now, GRI 3 is very interesting and almost used the most. And this deals with where goods prima facie, which means right on its face, first impression, is classified under two or more headings. Then what do you do? GRI 3A, wow, this is a lot of writing, and I'm going to give you a copy of this presentation after the event. But what I want to say is that what it says here is that the most specific description shall be preferred to a heading providing a more general description, right on the first line. So that's the essence of GRI 3A. And when, both apply, what we're saying is use the one that tries to give a little more complete and precise description of your product. For instance, in this case, we've got this electric shaver, but there's two headings. Number one, there's an electromechanical tool for working in the hand, which is a handheld electromechanic tool. And there's also a shaver, hair clipper, or hair removing appliance. So what is this better classified as? A handheld electromechanical tool or a hair clipper? I would say a hair clipper, right? So that's why I would choose this heading. GRI 3B talks about mixtures, composite goods of different materials, or even goods put up in sets for retail sale. Now, a set is defined where there's two or more items that have a different HTS code, but it's put together in one of these boxes or containers for sale as a set. And you see a lot of these sets in the for kitchen items. It could have forks and spoons and plates and cups, or it could be a makeup set. It could have rouge and a comb and a mirror, right? So those are the type of sets we're looking at. And it says the material that gives the essential character is the basis of classification. In the interest of time, I've just defined what a composite good is right here. So over here, you've got a hunting knife that has a wooden handle, and you've got a little quartz analog clock. So what is this? Is this classified as a clock under Chapter 9105, or is it classified as a hunting knife with a wood handle under Chapter 8311? Now, what customs said is that the knife is the big thing. In this case. True, but what if this was just hung on the wall? In that case, the clock would be the most important and not the knife, right? So it all depends upon the use. What are you going to be using it for? If you're going to be using it for a knife, then that heading would provide the essential character. As I mentioned earlier, there are specific rules when you deal with sets. And they have to contain at least two or more different articles, not 6 forks, which is not a set because it's 6 of the same. And the rule is that it's got to be 2 or more products, and it's put together to meet a particular need, and it's really packaged in a way that it's suitable for direct sale to the end customer. And in that case, you can classify it as a set based on the essential character. Now here's an example. Look at this bowl of spaghetti. You've got spaghetti, which is under Chapter 19. It's also got a little bit of Parmigiano cheese under Chapter 4. And it's in a bowl of tomato, in a can of tomato sauce, which is Chapter 21. So here you have 3 items packaged together. So what would the HTS code be? You can raise your hand right now and say, well, the answer is GRI based on the general rule of interpretation 3B. This is a set, and the essential character is, what do you think it is? Well, I personally think it is the spaghetti. So, that's my example. Further, if you just cannot classify your goods based on GRI 1, 2, 3A, or 3B, then you go after the heading which is last in numerical order among those which equally merit consideration. So that's customs verbiage. And that's really where you have two classifications, both of which really appear to be the accurate one. You're going to choose the one later in numerical order. Now let's look at this. This could be, it's a radio that also has a cassette player and a telephone. This is a little dated from the 80s. And coincidentally, the two headings we're looking at are from the 80s. Chapter 8517, which is like a phone, or Chapter 8527, which is a radio. So in this case, because it could be classified under both phone and radio, we choose the later one in numerical order, GRI 8527, because of HTS 8527, because of GRI 3C. GRI 4 says, if you can't classify a product, ultimately choose a product that is very similar to that item and choose that classification. And that's, sorry, in the interest of time, I'll just speed up a little bit. GRI 5 talks about cases. And it says cases will, if it's with the item, fall with the item. And this be classified with the item. And this deals with very specialized cases, such as a jewelry case or a gun case or a camera case, right? Not just any plastic case, but a very specific case that's for long-term use, takes the shape and fit of the item, and really, gives the item, it has the same essential character. It will be classified as the item itself. Sorry, a little too many slides. And again, packaging material and packaging containers will be classified with the goods that they're normally used for packaging. So that's GRI 5, deals more with packaging and containers. GRI 6, that also talks about, at some times you might have to choose a heading. It may not be in numerical order, but if you have a justification for that. And, you should also look at all the chapter headings and subheadings over and above the GRIs for that purpose. Just a couple more examples. So let's also look at the US rules of interpretation. So in addition to the GRIs, which were formulated by the World Customs Organization, the United States came up with some additional rules, and these are known as the additional US rules of interpretation. And what they talk about is also look at the principal use, actual use, and how parts and accessories are treated. So let's look into these additional US rules of interpretation. And the principal use is also, very important. It deals with if your item could be used for various items, for various uses. What exactly is the controlling use on the date of import that your products were brought in for? And that's the principal use of the item. It also talks about actual uses, where if you're using it for a very peculiar purpose, you need to provide demonstration and example to customs that you were using it for that very specific purpose. Parts and accessories is one of the most misused provisions, and the reason for this is that many items they classify people would classify it rather than on its specific merits, rather than say a ball bearing or a little motor. They might just throw it under parts and accessories of the larger machine. And customs has said no. Under this US additional rule 1C, they said parts and accessories, if they have their own classification in the tariff, they need to fall under that tariff classification and not as parts and accessories of the main item. Now, if you say that it has no role beyond being a part of the main item and it was specifically created for the main item, then you have case. But really, if it had its own specific entry in the harmonized tariff, that's how you should classify it and not as parts and accessories. US 1D talks about textiles, but there's no textile representatives of this call, so I'll just skip that. This is a very important slide because this talks about additional resources. So the World Customs Agency has published a detailed 4 volumes called Explanatory Notes. Now, these are meant to accompany the harmonized code and provides guidance for what the World Customs Organization intended under any heading. So normally when we are trying to convince customs that our product is correctly classified under Chapter 8404, I will also include the explanatory notes for 8404 and tell customs, see, the vision and the intent of the people who drafted the HTS code is consistent with how our product has been classified. So this is not binding on any country, including the United States, but it has a lot of persuasive effect because this is issued by the World Customs Organization as a companion or interpretative tool to the HTS codes. CROSS is, I'll be honest with you, one of the first places I go. This is a website which stands for Customs Rulings Online Searchable System, CROSS. And this is essentially, the website is rulings.customs.gov. Don't try www, it doesn't work. It's just http rulings.cbp.gov. And this will take you to a website where you can search by product description. For example, if you've got a heart valve, you could look up heart valve, and you could see that maybe Customs has issued a similar ruling to other companies in the past. And that could be a great place for you to start. Remember that every customs ruling out there is binding only on that importer which requested it and is specific only to that importer's product. So if your product is similar, yellow instead of green, or 5 megahertz, kilowatts instead of 25, remember it is not binding on you, and you really need to exercise your discretion and see if that's applicable. But it's a great place to start so you can see customs logic and thought process on how they classify items. There's no substitute for having your own binding rulings, and that's something I'd recommend as well. There's also many informed compliance publications on Customs website that deals with many different product areas, and Customs calls it what the trade community needs to know about, blank, about customs value, related party screening, various different items. So that's a great resource as well. Whenever you have any gray areas, and that's my little interpretation of a black hole, what do? You've done your GRIs, you've done your research, but still you've fallen in a gray area. because two or more classifications could apply. Customs rulings appears to be neither here nor there, and there's, even the items that customs has issued rulings on, they're not quite the same as your item. It could be because your item is new technology or, a combination of existing technology. What I would highly recommend is a binding ruling. A lot of people say a binding ruling is a double-edged sword. The downside is, guess what? You're stuck to the heading and the duty rate that customs gave you. Sorry, not to the duty rate, because duty rates change, but you're stuck with the HTS code. That is true, but if you look on the other side of it, isn't it better that you have a ruling from customs and you know what HTS code to use every time, and there's no threat of customs coming in the future and telling you, you know what, you misclassified, here's a higher rate of duty. That could be a nightmare and change all your financial projections, right? So I highly recommend, if your product is a little complex or falls in under the gray area, apply for a binding ruling. You are allowed to apply for a binding ruling either electronically, which means submitting it online, or you could even send a paper, a letter describing your product in detail. Sometimes, actually prior to 9/11, the unfortunate tragedy of in New York in 2001, customs, actually the customs house was in the World Trade Center complex, the customs building. They used to ask for samples. Because of security nowadays, they don't ask you to send samples unless they specifically request it, But they do ask you to give product information, give photographs, give drawings, give website, right? And usually, they usually send you a response in 30 days. So that's a good thing. But obviously, if your product is very complicated, they might send it to headquarters, and that might take some additional time. Friends, with that, we conclude this 101 on HTS classification. But I'm thrilled to answer any questions now. You can just type your question in the chat window and we'll address it. And I also want to say, as I mentioned earlier, and I'd like to re-emphasize, classification for different commodity groups, have different rules. So if you're in a different field, such as some people have told me on the call, chemicals or electronics or, medical devices as well, please remember, I'm delighted to have a separate phone call with you to discuss your items or any specific questions you have that's unique to your HTS chapters. Okay, so I'll just stand by and wait for the questions to come in.